Thank you, Kathleen. Excited to be here this morning. So let's dive right in. My name is Alex Karpowitsch. I have served in the EDI product management role for a little over a year and a half now. And today I'd like to take some time just to go over the core Plex EDI product, how Plex approaches EDI development for trading partners, and the release of our new EDI product, Smart EDI. So to begin, just to give you a global overview of what Plex does in the EDI space. EDI is data, electronic data interchange, and we exchange a lot of data. Annually, we process, send and receive close to 20 million transactions. And in our trading partner library, we have over 1,000 trading partners. So in Plex's existence, we've built out this trading partner library, which essentially automates supply chain functions. And this automation of this supply chain function is a key value component to the Plex ERP system. So as it relates to the exchange of data, I thought it would be useful just to begin by going through how this data is exchanged. So EDI starts with a trading partner, which we commonly refer to as the customer and a supplier relationship. So again, the trading partner and the supplier enter a business arrangement, and the supply chain functions that are ultimately executed between the customer and supplier is largely facilitated through this electronic data interchange. So to begin with, and on that far right-hand side, you see the trading partner. And typically, just to make a more efficient transaction method and kind of generalize among protocols, trading partners often use third-party van services to facilitate this data transfer. There's quite a few van services out there, but essentially those are kind of like a collaboration point in which the data can be exchanged. It's similar to if you had AT&T and the other customer had Verizon. To make that interconnect between two different carriers, you would need like a kind of facilitation point so that data can be interchanged. We also increasingly see, especially in Europe, direct connections, but most often in North America, we see trading partners using these van services, which allows interconnection between the supplier and the trading partner. So once that data is received by the van, Plex has a network connection to that van provider, and we bring that data into Plex, and there's a number of functions that then subsequently occur that basically kicks off this supply chain process. So again, when you think of EDI data, if you were to open an EDI file, this is essentially a text file that contains business information, and that business information ultimately is parsed and processed by Plex. And at the end of the day, if it's an order, this is the data representation of what you would see physically on a paper order. So there's quite a bit of formatting. Each of these EDI trading partners have different specifications. How they refer to business objects within those specifications can actually differ between trading partners. However, the formatting of the data is largely defined by three main bodies, standardized bodies. In North America, we often use the X12 standard. In Europe, the EDIFACT and VDA standard is often used. So again, the data is encapsulated in a file, which then goes to a van service, which is then received in Plex. And we support, of course, all three of those data formats. And then the real value begins when we begin to process that information, which ultimately facilitates additional supply chain functions. So again, once you receive that order, what do you do with it? Well, you need to make sure that the order is correctly attributed to the customer in which the order pertains to. And then, you can continue parsing data within that file to make sure that a valid customer purchase order is set up. the corresponding internal parts that you manage in your ERP system matches what you have associated with the customer parts. So all of this information contained within this order file, ultimately to derive value from it, it needs to be parsed and validated properly to facilitate supply chain automation. So that's really what Plex is keyed in on and focused on with respect to our ERP product. Now on that left-hand side, you'll see reference to Smart EDI. And as I referenced, within that data payload, if you were to compare each of a advanced shipping notice between customers, you would notice that there's many things in common, even though the specifications might be a little bit different. There are certain common core business objects between each of these formats, between these specifications. So what a strategy Plex has pursued for a number of years now is that for data sent back to the Plex trading partner, before we first generate a intermediate XML format, and then we do what we call mapping to a target EDI format. Now, this process in terms of mapping is certainly not new. Plex didn't invent it. The concept of mapping data from a ERP data payload output to a specific EDI format is something that's occurred in industry for quite some time. But we have a tool in which we're leveraging, which I'll elaborate on momentarily. We feel in terms of how we've integrated it into the core ERP will ultimately provide quite a bit of additional velocity to how Plex develops trading partners, which will ultimately allow Plex to deliver more trading partners faster, which is what our customers increasingly rely on Plex for. All of this automation, we live in a world of automation. We've seen EDI growth close to 20 to 30% year over year with respect to the number of additional and new trading partners that Plex customers are looking for Plex to develop. So this is the core of what ERP and software has for a value proposition, is this automation. So let's dig into that further. So this diagram basically refers to, again, the underlying core business processes: procure to pay, order to cash, plan to produce. And all of these individual supply chain functions in the EDI space, we often refer to these as transaction types. So again, the transaction type, when the trading partner sends the supplier, in which case that's the Plex customer. In the automotive space, we typically see sales order forecasts and sales order ship schedules. Sales order forecast is kind of future dated demand 30 days and further out, and sales order ship schedules pertain to data that, for example, on Monday I need this part number in this quantity, and subsequently for the next 7 to 10 days. So more immediate orders. This information, this cycle, of course, once the supplier receives that order, they produce the material, and then finally, when it comes time to ship the material, the most common two transaction types that we see transmitted back to the trading partner are the advanced ship notice, which is referred to as the ASN, and of course an invoice. And ultimately, the automotive trading partners typically have very stringent requirements. As soon as the truck physically leaves the facility, the notice to the trading partner needs to be electronically submitted within 10 minutes, because the trading partner factory needs to be aware of the material arriving, because of course, especially in the automotive space, again, additional sequencing may sometimes take place, and there's additional supply chain functions which the trading partner needs to execute. So I've said the word trading partner quite a few times, and I've referred to transaction types. I thought we'd double click into that for a moment, just to kind of hone in on how Plex views what constitutes a trading partner. So again, each of those transaction types, and there are both inbound transaction types. So that's data sent from the trading partner to the supplier. Most commonly that begins with an order. And there are, again, outbound transaction types. So with EDI, there's two sides to the coin. There's input, inbound data, output, outbound data. These transaction types, and for the inbound, I referred to the sales order ship schedule, the sales order forecast, but there's also many, many additional transaction types. For example, a discrete purchase order, so just a one-time purchase order. Even in individual industries such as steel or retail, there are specific transaction type orders which again execute additional downstream supply chain functions. For example, in retail, the individual discrete purchase order, instead of it being a high volume scenario, which we see more commonly in automotive, the first process that essentially kicks off from receiving that discrete purchase order is a purchase order acknowledgement. So in this scenario, the Plex customer supplier would essentially evaluate the individual line items that constitute that order to ensure and confirm with the trading partner that they're able to fulfill that order, or if they're able to fulfill a portion of that order. So again, each of these core business automation components, what we refer to as transaction types, are encapsulated in EDI specifications. EDI can be a dense, complex topic for people who are potentially or may not familiar with EDI, but the one nice part about EDI is that everything is encapsulated in a specification, because these specifications with data, you have to have the right input and the right output. There's no faking it. You have to collectively parse both the inbound and subsequently produce the correct outbound output in order for valid EDI transactions to be parsed and then subsequently sent back to that trading partner. So these transaction types are provided to us in the form of EDI specifications. So from a Plex customer's perspective, when they request new trading partner development for Plex to execute, one of the first things that we ask for from the Plex customer is, can you please attach the specifications? And ultimately, those specifications are what Plex delivers against, so that when we offer that trading partner in our trading partner library, we can be confident and assure the customer that we meet all of the supply chain and automation requirements as outlined as per that EDI specification. So those specifications, as I alluded to, pertain to a number of specific supply chain components. This is what we refer to in terms of the core EDI ERP integration. It begins again with validating that inbound data. And I won't go through all of this table, but I think it's important to call out that that begins with parsing that inbound data to make sure that the corresponding configuration is present in the ERP. So if it's an order, again, we have to match up with the customer that this order pertains to. We have to make sure that there's a valid order number that's entered that is present and documented in the file that was received from the trading partner. And we also need to ensure that the customer parts exist. And there's all sorts of additional information as outlined in the EDI specification related to what's contained in that file that the ERP needs to process and validate to ensure that the automation function and the subsequent creation of releases, so individual line items, can take place. That is the core of the Plex EDI ERP integration, and that's what we do differently. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit, but essentially this processing, this core logic of making sure that the ERP has the appropriate setup, excuse me, and configuration is where we feel that we truly have a value add and we have a market leading offering. In the absence, for example, of this configuration, we provide self-service corrective action prompts. If you didn't have the customer purchase order set up, not only will we inform the customer that the order is set up, we will actually parse the file and reference the order number that needs to set up. Or for example, the plant code. The plant code is often used to ultimately define where the shipment pertaining to that order needs to go to. So we have intelligent parsing of data in Plex to ultimately direct Plex customers the corrective action they may need to apply in their configuration so that when this data is processed for the first time, they can set up that information correctly. And again, uh, this this level of configuration, once it is in place, it scales very nicely, because once you've configured everything as it should, whether you're receiving 100 orders and releases or 10,000, as long as that configuration and validation is taking place, parsing that from a computing standpoint is that's what computers are good at. They can process a lot of data very quickly. But again, the key to the door is getting that configuration, and we spend a lot of time and great care to make sure that the overall experience with respect to instructing the Plex user on any potential corrective action for that EDI information. We spend a lot of time doing that. And ultimately, this information is populated on labels and shipping paperwork. And again, all of this information flows into the other part of the system. So EDI is really the door into the ERP and the automation that takes place between the supplier and the customer. So again, just more additional information I thought I'd include. There are human readable reports that Plex provides. Many times Plex customers are interested in the accums that are recorded between supplier and trading partner. And that's kind of like a general ledger, keeping track of how much material year to date a customer and supplier has sent. So of course, just making sure that both the customer or the supplier and the trading partner are in agreement on that is of course useful and relevant to a supplier. Looking at my watch, so I should probably keep moving. So moving on now to Smart EDI. For many years now, Plex customers have expressed to Plex that they're looking to be involved and have control and be empowered to modify EDI content. And when we approached that problem, or I should say challenge, we thought it was also cogent to Plex's interest, because we don't want to be the sole experts in the EDI space. Any good software company ultimately at some stage provides tooling and empowers customers and partners to modify the core content of the systems to meet their individual needs. Plex can't be cognizant of all of its customers' needs. We certainly make spend quite a bit of time and effort into facilitating that in terms of meeting EDI specifications. But we ultimately partnered with a middleware provider, Dell Boomi, and Dell Boomi allows Plex customers and partners to modify that content. So we just launched the product. We're using the tool internally, and then later this year, it's looking like late second quarter, we're going to open this up to a select group of customers and partners so that they can again modify that EDI content. I'll give a specific scenario where this is useful. Say, for example, there's another automotive trading partner in Europe. This seems to be, I don't know why, it seems to happen very frequently in Europe. And they're running one version of SAP at one plant, and there's another version of SAP at another plant. And even though the EDI specification that they had provided to Plex for the advanced ship notice says this segment is optional, this other plant is requiring it. And it's, maybe that other plant has a different vehicle program, and that's the reason why that they want this extra EDI segment that Plex didn't include. The reason why we didn't include it was because it wasn't in the specification. Previously, when a customer would come to Plex at that requirement, we would have to design, write up a functional requirement document. It would need to go to engineering to be scheduled. There was a little overhead, of course, with any sort of engineering delivery. in this model with Smart EDI, we're able to work with a Plex customer who's interested in instituting that change themselves so they can rapidly respond to that new trading partner requirement. The Plex product team, myself and Vista Huggins, are working with Plex customers to assist them in that scenario for that customization. I thought I'd give a quick peek, and we'll of course have more information out on the Plex community later this year. But the tooling that we're using is a visual user interface for making these mappings to take the generalized ASN and invoice XML, and then of course mapping that to the target EDI format. It's tooling that Boomi and Dell have been building for 20 years now. We're not experts in building user interfaces as it relates to EDI mapping. That's very new to us. That's, again, another reason why we decided to partner with Dell Boomi. One point that I want to mention that I think is particularly relevant, Plex customers do not need to log into Boomi to use Smart EDI trading partners. We want to make all of this transparent to Plex customers in that Plex will always be the single source of truth. So while, under the sheet metal, we've changed the powertrain and the electrical harnesses and all of this goodness underneath that comprises the Plex EDI product, at the end of the day, our customer just expects to put the key in the ignition and for the car, to shift into drive and to use the EDI product the same way that they've always have. So with this new delivery model, again, customers do not need to log into Boomi. They just need to put a template on the mailbox, just as anyone who's been working in the EDI space is familiar with. So that same configuration workflow pattern is true in Smart EDI as well. Smart EDI is for new trading partners only. That's another component of this I wanted to mention. All of the existing EDI that our customers are using, that's not changing. It's not being modified in any way. This is simply for new requirements. Of course, as trading partners update their specifications, Vista Huggins, who's our EDI manager, evaluates each of these, in her team, evaluates each of these requirements to ultimately determine the quickest way to deliver these requirements, which often we rebuild some of these trading partners and specifications in Smart EDI. So how does Plex compare? We say we have this market-leading product. Can you prove it? What's our proof point for that? So, as I mentioned previously, when we compare Plex EDI to some of our competitors in the EDI space, like SPS Commerce or EDI 123, what we often see is that EDI is typically positioned from these other offerings as in a web portal. So data is received by that trading partner, it's presented visually, and that data is then subsequently copied into the customer's ERP, or there's some integration method. Sometimes that integration method is manual. The customer has additional staff that enters that information. But what we find is that in this model, it's a very difficult model to scale. Anytime you're introducing manual oversight of high volume data, that's just not something that scales. And of course, there's potential for error for that as well. So again, we feel that we have a market leading EDI product, specifically as it relates to parsing that data and the automation that takes place during that information parsing, and subsequently turning that data back to the supplier's trading partner. So all of these bullet points at the end of the day, we're facilitating automation. We have a very large trading partner library. All of these trading partners, we've taken great care to ensure that both the inbound and outbound components of the EDI specifications are met per the specification. And we have a support group that works closely with all of our customers to ensure that if they have any questions related to setup and configuration, we're able to assist them with that as well, because this is a sophisticated tool. it has a tremendous value in terms of facilitating that automation. So it's important to subsequently provide documentation and support to ensure our customers are in a position for success for that automation. I think I've covered most of this at this point. It, of course, is if you have read any Plex marketing copy, I'm sure you've heard that we're cloud-based. This is a SaaS-based solution. Plex hosts and manages all of this. So at the end of the day, our customers are able to focus on what matters, which is managing their business, as opposed to working in the ERP and copying EDI data into a system. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. I had some questions, but I don't think they came up during the presentation, but that's okay. I think
we're going to go ahead and do those polling questions now.
Oh, okay, cool.
And meanwhile, I forgot to remind everyone, if you have any questions about Alex's presentation, go ahead and feel free to type that into the question box or raise your hand, and we'll do those questions after these polling questions. So go ahead and take a minute to answer this first polling question. Okay, we'll go ahead and look at the results. So does EDI ERP automation play a key role in maintaining order release accuracy along with downstream supply chain functions? 92% said yes.
Great.
And the next one, I have experience developing EDI mappings. We'll go ahead and give you a minute to answer that question. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at those results. So more than half do not have experience developing EDI mappings. So this looks like the easier.
It's a good opportunity to provide some instruction, training, and I think we're going to be putting together a Plex education course for that in the third quarter of this year. So okay. Stay tuned.
Great. We do have a couple of questions. Let's see. So the first question, if Plex builds training partners in compliance with EDI specifications, where would EDI mapping customization be useful?
It would be useful in that the customer wants to, again, get ahead of that trading partner requirement, not have to wait for Plex. So if you're very eager to fulfill that trading partner requirement, if the trading partner says, red light, I'm not, you know, I'm not recognizing the ASNs and invoices in which you're sending, and the subtext of that is, I'm not paying you until you fix this. We can, you know, jump on a call together, and Vista and I will help you to institute that change yourself. Of course, we would eventually incorporate that change into the trading partner mapping, but it's kind of for very custom and emergency situations where that needs to be executed. We're very sensitive to making changes that apply to the mappings. One last thing that I forgot to mention, that this is a very key point for Smart EDI. In the prior EDI model, it was a big bang deployment. All of the customers were affected by a change to the ASN and invoice, and that was true whether it was a template that Plex had developed or iConnect map. With Smart EDI for the outbound mappings, all of these mappings are in a sandbox customer environment. So you can opt into changes and test to your discretion. There's no rush. Previously, one customer, because of, again, these very urgent scenarios, would push to have this change instituted. They gave a thumbs up, but a second scenario, just by the complex nature of Plex settings and customer requirements, they didn't test for that other scenario. So another customer may have rejected transactions because they had that shared mapping in the former delivery model, but with Smart EDI, all of the outbound transactions are isolated to a customer. So it's, again, we'll provide additional benefit for customers that utilize smart EDI trading partners.
Okay, great. We have one other question, and then I think Pat wanted to ask a question. So the next one says, could an Excel file with appropriate data be used to create an 856 ASN using smart EDI with an existing Plex 856 template?
I'd like to talk to you more about that. I believe if ultimately that Excel file contains information that would be part of a shipment, we have the existing XML that we would generate out of Plex. So we've done most of that work for you. Maybe that Excel file contains additional information that's not present in our ASN canonical or schema. And if that's the case, then there's tens of thousands of data sources in Plex. We don't include all of these data sources in the shipment output. We include all of them, which globally meet our trading partner needs. But if there's additional data that needs to be included in that ASN XML output, certainly reach out to me. I'd like to know more, and I'm sure we could add it. That's no problem. We're always adding additional data sources to the XML output.
Okay, great. Pat, did you have a question?
Yeah, questions, some comments. First of all, Alex, thank you for joining us and presenting today. We appreciate it. As Revolution Group, as a Boomi partner, we're really excited about the direction that Smart EDI is going and leveraging the Boomi tool set since we standardized on it from an integration standpoint. So my question is, we're accustomed to having a tremendous amount of flexibility when we do integrations and building in business logic using the Boomi tool set. So do you expect that full suite of functionality will be available within Smart EDI?
So that is a great question, and it's something I've been thinking about because EDI is more than just mapping. It's more than just XML. You can orchestrate API calls through Boomi, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yes.
There's custom business logic. That's a very exciting space because then the sky is the limit. Ultimately, though, in the integration ecosystem, it's dependent on Plex APIs, and we're always building additional APIs. And those APIs are in the core application space. So the EDI group, we use a very basic number of EDIs just to facilitate PMC to Boomi integration. But what you're referring to, for example, like getting at the part table or the inventory table or any number of tables. Yes, the answer to that is yes. I think it's kind of like a crawl, walk, run. We're still in the early days of Boomi, but you're absolutely correct and prescient in that is ultimately, yes, where it's going to go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity of being able to present this. And again, certainly if we look forward to collaborating with Revolution Group on building out and maturing both our EDI and middleware offerings. So thanks, Pat and Kathleen.